Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching WION The World this one with me, Joseph Command. This is World Unit.
And I'm Diksha Bisla, and coming up on the show today, tensions in West Asia are escalating sharply as the United States launches retaliatory strikes on Iranian targets. Now, Washington says the action was in response to attacks on US forces, while Tehran accuses America of violating a ceasefire and targeting civilian-linked sites near the Strait of Hormuz. Are these latest developments raising fears of a wider regional conflict? Well, we'll get you all the details on the show today. Stay tuned.
Well, also on the show on the Russia-Ukraine front, Russia says it has intercepted 20 drones, and this is ahead towards Moscow just hours after its self-declared ceasefire came into effect. And these developments come amid rising tensions ahead of Russia's Victory Day celebrations, with Ukraine warning foreign leaders against attending these parade in Moscow, threatening possible strikes on Kyiv despite the announced truce. We'll get you all the details on that as well. Let's begin with the headlines.
We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle. I'll let you know when there's no ceasefire. You won't have to know. If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know.
US President Donald Trump dismisses Iran's attack on 3 American warships as a trifle, claiming that the US forces responded strongly during the exchange. Says he considers ceasefire with Tehran is still active.
Trump says U.S. forces caused great damage to Iranian attackers after 3 American naval destroyers targeted, though no U.S. ships were harmed. Warns of stronger future military action if Iran does not quickly agree to a deal.
US and its Gulf allies, they push United Nations to demand that Iran end its blockade of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. And this amid a draft resolution facing strong opposition. Veto holding Russia reportedly warns it would block the move.
Lebanon says at least 12 people, including 2 children and a paramedic, killed in Israeli airstrikes despite a ceasefire. Strikes followed a previous attack in which the IDF killed Hezbollah commander in Beirut's southern suburbs.
Moscow mayor says Russian air defenses intercept 20 drones heading towards Moscow within 2 hours of the start of Russia's declared unilateral truce early Friday.
Polls closed across England, Scotland and Wales in local elections, marking PM Starmer's first major test since 2024 landslide. Opinion polls predict heavy losses for Labour and Conservatives amid gains for Reform UK and the Greens.
Panama's president says tensions with China have eased after a period of disputes involving Panamanian-flagged ships being detained in Chinese ports, as US and China continue to accuse each other of seeking influence over the Panama Canal.
Trump says he had a great call with Ursula von der Leyen and will give the European Union until July 4th to meet terms of a trade deal agreed in Scotland. Trump warned that U.S. tariffs on EU vehicles could rise sharply if the bloc fails to comply. The U.S. and Iran traded strikes in Strait of Hormuz, threatening to unravel an already fragile truce.
Well, President Donald Trump has insisted the ceasefire remains in effect. And the U.S. military says American forces carried out strikes on Iranian military targets on Thursday after what it described as an attack on 3 U.S. destroyers operating in the Strait of Hormuz.
And according to U.S. Central Command, Iranian forces launched missiles, drones, and small boats towards the vessel CENTCOM said none of the destroyers were hit and it intercepted incoming threats before targeting Iran and military facilities responsible for the attack.
Now, Iran, however, has rejected the American account. Tehran's Central Military Command accused Washington of violating the ceasefire first by attacking an oil tanker and another ship earlier in the day. Iranian officials said their forces responded immediately by targeting American military vessels.
President Donald Trump addressed the confrontation on social media, saying U.S. forces caused great damage to Iranian targets. In an interview with ABC News, he described the strikes as, and I'm quoting, a love tap.
Trump also warned that future responses would be harder and more violent if, and I'm quoting here again, they don't get their deal signed fast. At the same time, the president maintained that a ceasefire arrangement is still active. Listen to this.
Yeah, it is. They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle. I'll let you know when there's no ceasefire. You won't have to know. If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know. You're just going to have to look at one big glow coming out of Iran.
The renewed tensions come amid continuing disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil shipping routes. The International Maritime Organization says around 1,500 ships and 20,000 international crew members are currently stranded in the Gulf region because of the conflict. President Trump briefly authorized a naval operation earlier this week aimed at reopening the strait to commercial shipping.
Well, before suspending the effort dubbed Project Freedom, now reports suggested that the project was paused after Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, they blocked access to their airspace and bases. However, a new report suggests that the two Gulf allies have lifted these restrictions now. According to the Wall Street Journal, U.S. is preparing to restart the naval mission, and it could restart as early as this week.
At the United Nations, the U.S. urged countries to support its resolution demanding Iran halt attacks and mining of the Strait of Hormuz, but diplomats said China and Russia are likely to veto it.
A Chinese veto would be awkward ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's trip to China next week, where the Iran war is likely to be high on the agenda.
Iran, on the other hand, defended its actions, saying it is acting in accordance with international law in the Strait of Hormuz and accused the U.S. of playing a destabilizing role in the region.
This should be a simple demand: the removal of mines from an international waterway, that you cannot exact illegal tolls. We have to address these violations here in the Council. And we have to ask ourselves, if a country chooses to oppose such a simple proposition, do they really want peace?
And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Take a look.
The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations stood alongside ambassadors from several Gulf countries on Thursday as Washington pushed a new Security Council resolution accusing Iran of threatening global shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Ambassador Mike Waltz said that the U.S. drafted the resolution with Bahrain and warned that freedom of navigation is, quote unquote, a cornerstone of worldwide stability and commerce. The diplomatic push comes as the Wall Street Journal is now reporting that Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have lifted restrictions on U.S. military access to their bases as well as their airspace, a major development that could allow the Trump administration to once again start Project Freedom. But despite growing Gulf backing for Washington, the UN resolution still faces obstacles from China and Russia, which vetoed a similar resolution regarding the Strait of Hormuz last month. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has condemned the proposal as being one-sided and provocative. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Is the US hiding the true extent of damage to its military bases from Iranian sites in West Asia? Well, a Washington Post report, it reveals that strikes hit far more targets than officials have admitted.
And these are satellite imagery that shows Iranian airstrikes damaged or destroyed at least 228 structures and pieces of equipment across U.S. sites. The analysis, of course, points to hits on barracks, hangars, and warehouses at over half of the bases targeted. Key military installations across Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia were targeted.
Now, the imagery reviewed in the report also confirmed earlier accounts of damage to Rodom Sat Camp Arifjan and Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, as well as at the headquarters of the US's 5th Fleet.
It further shows strikes on THAAD missile defense radar systems and related equipment at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan and at 2 sites in the United Arab Emirates. A second satellite communications facility at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was also reportedly hit, along with an E-3 Sentry command aircraft and a refueling tanker at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia.
The report says more than 400 U.S. troops were injured during the war, while some bases were considered too dangerous to operate at normal capacity. For years, the United States projected its Gulf military presence as heavily protected, but the latest findings, they suggest that Iran was able to penetrate and strike critical parts of America's military infrastructure across West Asia.
Now, Iran is moving to tighten its grip over the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, Tehran has introduced a new system for the vessels trying to pass through the contested waterway. All vessels seeking to transit will have to submit detailed information to a newly created Iranian authority. The move signals Iran's intent to formalize control over the waterway. Now, Iran's newly established Persian Gulf Strait Authority, or PGSA, it has issued what it calls a Vessel Information Declaration. The document requires ships to disclose extensive details before entering the strait, including their ownership, crew nationalities, cargo information, and destinations.
According to the document, vessels must submit the information by email and wait for the further instructions before receiving clearance to pass. Iranian authorities warn that any incomplete or incorrect information could lead to consequences. The Strait of Hormuz has long been considered international waters with free navigation guaranteed for global shipping. But since the start of the U.S. and Israeli war, Iran has repeatedly threatened to target any ship crossing without permission.
Several vessels have already come under attack, prompting many shipping companies to avoid the route altogether. Traffic through the strait has collapsed, and during the conflict, around 120 ships cross the waterway every day. Now, only a fraction of that number is moving through the choke point. The Revolutionary Guard has expanded its maritime control zone around the strait, while the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports remains in place, leaving thousands of vessels stranded in the Gulf waters. All right, now shifting focus, Russia said it intercepted 20 drones bound for Moscow within 2 hours of the start of its declared unilateral truce.
Now, the interceptions were reported by Moscow mayor, citing country's air defense forces as the city prepares for a World War II victory parade. Earlier, Russian air defense reported intercepting 347 Ukrainian drones overnight, marking the second largest drone assault of the war, surpassed only by an attack involving 389 drones in March. The drones targeted over 20 Russian regions, including Moscow, with additional drone waves launched later on Thursday. The attacks disrupted air travel across Moscow's 3 major airports, where nearly 100 flights were delayed or cancelled.
Now, the latest attacks come just before Russia's annual Victory Day celebrations on May 9th, one of the country's most important national holidays, marking the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Moscow will hold a scaled-down Victory Day parade, featuring only infantry and heightened security due to concerns over Ukrainian attacks. It will omit military hardware from the procession for the first time in almost 20 years, while mobile internet services will be cut off during the parade to prevent disruptions.
Russian presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said additional security measures were being taken ahead of Victory Day due to what he called a quote-unquote complex operational situation. He added that necessary security measures were being taken to ensure the safety of the citizens.
The event will see fewer foreign dignitaries attending the commemorations, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned countries allied to Russia against attending the Victory Day parade in Moscow. Listen to this.
They want Ukraine's permission to hold their parade so they can safely take to the square for an hour once a year and then go back to killing our people and waging war. The Russians are already talking about strikes after May 9th. A strange and certainly twisted logic from the Russian leadership. There are also messages from some states close to Russia that their representatives intend to be in Moscow. An odd desire at a time like this. We do not recommend it.
Now, in the meantime, Russia has urged residents and diplomats to leave Kiev for the second time in less than 24 hours. In a statement, the Russian Defense Ministry asked the civilian population of Kiev and staff at 4 diplomatic missions once for the need to leave the city in good time, adding that the forces would answer in kind in case of a Ukrainian attack.
While following the Russian warning, UK's Foreign Office said Moscow's threats were unwarranted, irresponsible and completely unjustified, adding that any attack on a diplomatic mission would be a further escalation in the war.
Now, while German Foreign Minister Johann Wedeful has said that in an interview that Berlin will not pull its embassy staff out from Kiev. Germany said it would not be intimidated by Moscow and will continue to support Ukraine and increase the pressure on Russia.
On the other hand, Ukraine's top negotiator, Rustem Umerov, has arrived in Miami for a series of meetings with U.S. representatives. Zelensky confirmed that Umerov is tasked with discussing a possible prisoner of war swap and stepping up diplomatic efforts to end the war.
All military aid now will help.
Was dynamic.
And China is seeking to stabilize its ties with the United States. The country's Premier Li Qiang has called for both the sides to engage in more dialogue than confrontation and pursue a mutually beneficial cooperation.
Well, a delegation of senators from the United States is on a Beijing visit. They call for stability and peaceful cooperation between the world's 2 largest economies. It comes a week before the highly anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
The U.S. Senator Steve Daines, who is leading the bipartisan delegation, is hopeful of a good and productive meeting between the U.S. and Chinese side in the coming days, whereas Chinese Premier Li Qiang said Beijing is looking forward to strengthen ties with Washington in all areas.
China is willing to strengthen exchanges and cooperation with the United States in all areas, expand more practical cooperation, and ensure that the people of both countries gain more tangible benefits from China-U.S. cooperation.
Trump is scheduled to travel to the Chinese capital to meet China's Xi Jinping on the 14th and 15th of May.
Trump's visit to China, his first one in 8 years, will be closely watched. It was postponed due to Iran war earlier. Relations between Washington and Beijing have remained stable after striking an uneasy trade truce last October following the leaders' meeting in South Korea.
The U.S. Senator's visit to Beijing ahead of crucial Trump-Xi meet underscores the ongoing efforts to maintain dialogue between China and the United States. Both sides have expressed hope that sustained engagement could help stabilize the world's most consequential bilateral relationship. And Britain is summoning the Chinese ambassador after a London court convicted 2 men of spying on Hong Kong dissidents on behalf of Chinese authorities.
The 2 men were linked to a Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. Bill Yuen, the London office manager, and Peter Wai were found guilty of assisting a foreign intelligence service 2 years after their arrests. A third accused, Matthew Trickett, was found dead before the trial.
According to The Times, the spy ring was arrested after a long-running investigation by MI5. Located in the central London, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office has outwardly focused on promoting business and cultural ties between Britain and Hong Kong.
Now, on the face of it, the 65-year-old UN managed the office. In reality, he commissioned and paid to private detectives to spy on dissidents who dare to criticize Hong Kong's government. Peter Y is a Royal Navy veteran and a former constable with London Police for becoming an immigration officer. Prosecutors said Y used his position as a UK border force officer to gather personal information about Hong Kong activists in the UK. They were arrested in May 2024 while breaking into a flat in a trap set up by the MI5.
In a statement, Security Minister Dan Jarvis said that Britain will summon the Chinese ambassador. In a statement, he said that the activities carried out by these men on behalf of China are an infringement of British sovereignty and will not be tolerated. He added that UK will continue to hold China to account.
Actors involved to account. There is proven evidence of attempts by China to interfere with UK officers.
Are men bad for the planet? Because a global study is raising questions over climate change and the role of gender towards it.
Well, over 20 scientists from 13 countries say that certain masculine lifestyles are accelerating environmental damage faster than many people realize. Our next report explores more for you on this. Take a look.
A new international research paper has linked masculine behavior patterns with higher environmental damage and larger carbon footprints. The study, published in the journal Norma, International Journal for Masculinity Studies, examined climate politics, industrial practices, food habits, and social attitudes across several countries. Researchers reviewed existing studies on global warming, pollution, and environmental collapse. According to their findings, men on average consume more carbon-intensive products and services, especially when it comes to transportation, tourism, and meat consumption. The global report also claims that men show lower levels of concern about climate change and are generally less active in environmental politics. Researchers say many men resist changing everyday habits, even as climate warnings grow more urgent. A 2025 study from France involving 15,000 participants found that men produced 26% more emissions than women through food and travel habits alone. Another study published last year in the Journal of Environmental Psychology linked masculinity stress with climate denial and resistance to eco-friendly choices. Researchers found that some men avoid sustainable products because they fear appearing less masculine. The global paper also highlights the dominance of men in high-pollution sectors such as heavy industry, industrial agriculture, extraction-based businesses, and militarism. One of the editors of the paper says there is now significant evidence showing the environmental impact of certain male behaviors. Researchers clarified that the problem does not apply equally to all men, adding that wealthy elite men in industrialized Western societies contribute far more to environmental damage than low-income populations in the global South.
Now, Parisian authorities have remanded 95 people in custody, including 9 minors, following the violence that rocked the French capital after Paris Saint-Germain reached back-to-back UEFA Champions League finals.
Now, Paris has seen repeated outbreaks of disorder following major PSG matches in recent years, and Wednesday night was no different. Police arrested 127 people after post-match celebrations. They turned violent. And of them, 95 were remanded in custody in Paris. A further 14 minors outside Paris were also remanded in custody.
Clashes were reported across multiple parts of Paris, including outside Parc des Princes and along the Champs-Élysées. Police were deployed in large numbers to disperse crowds and stop rioters from blocking the Paris Ring Road. Several vehicles were also damaged during the unrest. In total, 23 police officers suffered minor injuries, while 11 civilians were also injured. This is according to the Public Prosecutor's Office. Those remanded in custody face charges including participating in unlawful gathering while armed, failing to disperse after police orders, and preparing for acts of violence or vandalism. In most serious cases, the accused could face up to 10 years in prison and fines of up to $177,000.
While condemning the violence, France's Interior Minister Laurent Nunez said, and I'm quoting him here, "To my knowledge, there was no looting of shops. There was an attempt, but it was prevented." The outcome was 127 arrests in the Paris metropolitan area, including 107 in Paris itself. 11 people were injured, one seriously after being hit by a mortar, and among police officers, 23 sustained minor injuries. And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break on World DNA.
We'll be back with more updates on the other side. India's capital, Delhi, is in spotlight once again, and for wrong reasons, that is. The national capital has emerged as most unsafe metro city for women in the country, recording the highest number of crimes against women among India's major cities. We'll get you all the details on that on the other side. Keep watching Beyond What Is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
In this rapidly changing world, is your health keeping pace? Best practices and breakthroughs busting the hype with real insights. The timeless power of yoga and ancient healing. Good food, good mood. Small steps, big impact. Your health matters. Only on WION World is One. Because nothing matters more.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. Beyond World is One.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching WION The World this one. That's the World DNA with me and Josna Kumar and my colleague Disha Bisla. Let's begin with the headlines.
We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle. I'll let you know when there's no ceasefire. You won't have to know. If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know.
US President Donald Trump dismisses Iran's attacks on 3 American warships as a trifle, claiming that the US forces responded strongly during the exchange. Says he considers ceasefire with Tehran as still active.
International Maritime Organization says around 1,500 ships and about 20,000 crew members are currently trapped in Gulf due to an Iranian blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
US and its Gulf allies push United Nations to demand that Iran end its blockade of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz amid a draft resolution facing strong opposition. Veto holding, Russia reportedly warns it would block the move.
Australian police charged 2 women linked to Islamic State extremist group with slavery offenses after they returned from Syria, where they had been detained in a refugee camp for more than 7 years.
We talked about tariffs. We talked about, they would like to have some tariff relief. But we had a very good meeting. He's a good man. He's a smart guy.
Donald Trump calls Brazilian President Lula da Silva a smart guy after their meeting, where they discussed trade, tariffs and security. Both sides say talks helped improve strained ties and could lead to increased trade.
U.S. imposes sanctions on Cuban military conglomerate Gaisa that controls nearly 40% of the island's economy, as well as Canadian mining company, as part of a mounting pressure campaign.
Panama's president says tensions with China have eased after a period of disputes involving Panamanian flagged ships being detained in Chinese ports, as US and China continue to accuse each other of seeking influence over Panama Canal.
Gaza hospital and Hamas say Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya's son dies from injuries sustained in an Israeli airstrike the previous day. Al-Shifa hospital confirms he succumbed to his wounds after being targeted in the strike.
Oil prices extended gains after renewed US-Iran clashes in the Strait of Hormuz raised fears over a fragile ceasefire and potential disruption to global shipping routes. Brent crude rose above $102, while US crude also moved higher.
दुश्मन की धरती पर घुस करके आतंकी भेड़ कार्टस को मिट्टी में मिला
जो हमें छेड़ेगा हम उसे छोड़ेंगे नहीं।
India marked 1 year of Operation Sindur, a military mission that hit the very core of Pakistan's terror infrastructure and caused significant damage to its airfields.
Now, this operation was launched in response to a cross-border terrorist attack in Pahalgam that killed 26 innocent people. The first anniversary Indian Armed Forces addressed a joint press conference. The Deputy Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Avadesh Kumar Bharati, revealed that India destroyed Pakistan's 9 terrorist camps, 11 airfields, and 13 aircraft during the operation.
And what are the hard facts? The hard facts are that we struck and decimated their 9 terrorist camps on the 7th of May. Proof is there for everybody to see. The hard facts and the ground reality is that we struck 11 of their airfields. The ground reality is that we destroyed 13 of their aircraft, either on ground or in the air, including one high-value airborne asset at a record distance of 300 kilometers plus.
Former Director General of Military Operations, Lieutenant General Rajiv Ghai, said that Pakistan suffered major losses with over 100 of their soldiers and similar number of terrorists killed during the confrontation.
So the numbers that they suffered on the line of control in the exchanges that followed, they lost more than 100 soldiers. That number is in excess of 100. 100 terrorists were what were killed in those 9 terrorist camps. So there was innumerable amount of damage.
Indian Army also released a picture of damaged Pakistani radar for the first time. The picture also featured an Indian military video marking 1 year anniversary of Operation Sindur.
Now, in a confrontation that lasted for 88 hours, India unleashed Rafale, hammer bombs, kamikaze drones, BrahMos and Storm Shadow missiles. On the defensive front, Akash and S-400 systems successfully guarded Indian skies from Pakistani projectiles.
According to the Indian government's latest assessment dossier assessed by WION, Pakistani terror groups such as Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba are yet to recover from the Indian strikes. Indian assessment described the strikes as precise and punitive, one that shows a shift in India's strategy moving beyond the legacy of strategic restraint.
No number.
Now, Delhi has once again recorded the highest number of crimes against women among India's major metropolitan cities,
with the latest data exposing persistent gaps in safety, reporting and justice delivery. Well, according to the latest report by the National Crime Records Bureau, the national capital has topped the list of 19 metropolitan cities for crimes against women in 2024. A total of 13,396 cases were registered in Delhi, keeping it firmly at the number for position 1 for overall crimes against women. And it's not confined to one category. The data shows a pattern across multiple crimes.
Now, Delhi records the highest number of rape cases among metros, 1,058 in 2024, including 6 cases classified as murder with rape or gang rape. Kidnapping and abduction remain deeply worrying, with 3,974 cases. Inside homes, the crisis is just as severe. 4,647 cases of cruelty by husbands or relatives point to the scale of domestic violence. In another category of assault or criminal force with intent to disrobe, the capital ranks highest yet again, reporting 279 cases. Dowry deaths continue to haunt the city, with 109 cases recorded over the year in 2024. The data even flags a disturbing trend involving minors. Delhi reports 1,489 cases under child protection laws involving girl victims, the highest among surveyed cities.
Now, while Delhi tops in absolute numbers, its crime rate measured per lakh population is also the highest in the country.
Now, analysts know that higher reporting levels, better access to policing, and greater awareness may contribute to the concentration of gender-based violence in urban spaces. However, the persistence of such numbers raises questions on deep-rooted structural challenges to address such crimes and ensure the safety of women.
And staying on news from India, a massive twist has emerged in the Mumbai watermelon case. The forensic examination has confirmed that the family of 4 died of toxic chemicals which are used to kill rats.
And police officials have revealed that the forensic investigation has confirmed the presence of highly toxic chemical compound in the viscera samples of deceased victims. Abdullah Dokaria, his wife Nasreen, and their 2 daughters fell sick after a family dinner and died shortly after.
Well, the tragic incident had sparked widespread speculation after reports suggested that the family may have fallen ill after consuming watermelon late at night. But reports citing police officials now reveal that the watermelon sample also tested positive for zinc phosphide, while all other food items were negative. A probe is underway into the incident, and police officials say the forensic report will be studied in depth.
Now, the chemical is commonly used as a rodenticide to kill rats and mice and is known to be extremely dangerous even in small quantities. On its own, the powder is relatively stable.
The danger begins the moment it enters the human stomach. The stomach contains hydrochloric acid, zinc phosphide. When it reacts with this acid, a chemical reaction is triggered. The reaction produces phosphine gas, which is a colorless, invisible gas that is toxic even in tiny amounts. The gas does not simply poison the blood, but attacks the cell at their most basic level, causing them to suffocate and die.
To give us more details on this case, our principal correspondent Disha Yadav sent us a report from Mumbai. Let's take a look.
Well, that is right. In a very important development, Mumbai police has confirmed that rat poison is one of the probable cause that has led to the death of the 4 family members in Mumbai. Remember, the incident took place on 25th of April this year when, after consumption of watermelons, 4 family members died under mysterious circumstances, and ever since then many teams got involved. There were watermelon samples which were also sent for testing, along with the other food items that the family had consumed during the party. Now the results have come out today, which has mentioned that the watermelon did have a sample of zinc phosphide, which is a chemical ingredient used in rat poison. So now, of course, Mumbai police is not really letting this investigation go. They are now aiming to find out how did that particular chemical ingredient got into the watermelon which was consumed. So they are looking at 2 probable causes here, whether this is an accidental poisoning or this is a suicide attempt that was done by the family members. This is Disha reporting here for WION from Mumbai.
All right, now moving to Pakistan, which is in grip of the severe heat wave. The country's meteorological department has now forecast heat wave conditions across the country from May 7th to 11th.
In Karachi, temperatures have risen above 40 degrees Celsius. Volunteers are helping commuters by spraying water, setting up roadside hydration points and assisting people showing signs of heat exhaustion.
It is very difficult to ride a motorcycle in these hot summer days. With the heat wave going on, there should be water camps at various places so that people can stop and drink water and freshen up a bit before driving off on their journey.
The intensifying harsher conditions in the city are affecting more than 20 million people. Hospitals are seeing a sharp rise in heat-related cases. At Jinnah Hospital in Karachi, patients are being treated in dedicated heat stroke wards. Doctors say the hot weather is having a severe impact on health, causing high blood pressure and diabetes.
As soon as temperature rose, the flow of patients increased because of the rise of blood pressure patients and diabetic patients. The number of patients increased in summer season. During the heat stroke season, hospital admittance rises as a result, on average a 30 to 50% increase compared to normal days.
30 to 50% रिपोर्ट ज़्यादा होते हैं नॉर्मल.
Well, Pakistan is considered highly vulnerable to climate change, despite contributing less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Scientists say climate change is worsening heat waves in South Asia. They are becoming longer, more frequent and more intense.
In recent years, Pakistan has faced repeated climate-related disasters. These include record-breaking floods in 2022. Large parts of the country were submerged, affecting more than 30 million people.
And Asia's deep dependence on Gulf oil is now turning into a major economic vulnerability as the energy crisis disrupts global supply chains. Asian economies are facing rising fuel prices, slowing growth and mounting inflation pressures.
Now, global institutions, including the IMF, ADB and Goldman Sachs, are now warning that the prolonged energy shock can trigger stagflation risks and weaken economic momentum across Asia. Here's a report that gives you more details. Take a look.
Asia is beginning to feel the full impact of the Persian Gulf energy paralysis. The region, which depends on the Gulf for nearly 85% of its oil imports, is now facing severe supply disruptions. According to Kepler data, Asia's oil imports from the Gulf fell to 14.8 million barrels per day in April, down from more than 18.6 million barrels per day in March. And that is a decline of nearly 4 million barrels daily in just 1 month. While the United States has increased crude exports to Asia, the additional supply is not enough to close the gap. US shipments are expected to rise by roughly 1 million barrels per day, far below the losses from the Gulf. Asian nations are also importing more Russian crude after Washington extended sanction waivers. But analysts say that global supply remains too tight to fully stabilize the market.
In terms of countries which will be able to withstand the crisis slightly better than the others, the United States in that regards will be insulated more than the others because the United States produces more oil, so at least physical shortage probably will not be felt in the United States, but there will be nevertheless a price spike. Asia will probably be hit hardest because the tolerance of Asian consumers for higher prices is much, much lower than in Europe. Europe will be able to afford to pay up, but again, it will come at a cost.
The energy shock is forcing economists and global institutions to reassess Asia's economic outlook. The Asian Development Bank and IMF have warned that the Gulf conflict is weakening the external balances and limiting policy options for Asian economies heavily dependent on imported oil and gas. Several countries are already facing stagflation risks, where slowing economic growth combines with rising prices. Poorer economies in Southeast Asia are among the most vulnerable because they lack large strategic oil reserves and have limited fiscal capacity to absorb higher fuel costs. Wealthier Asian economies are relying on strategic reserves and long-term energy coordination to manage the crisis. But even these buffers are beginning to come under pressure. China has accumulated more than 1 billion barrels in oil reserves and has diversified imports through Russia and Iran. Japan, which holds roughly 400 million barrels in reserves, has already started drawing down stockpiles to contain domestic fuel prices. At the same time, countries such as Japan and Australia are accelerating energy cooperation agreements to improve long-term security. But analysts warn that reserve releases and emergency measures only buy time if supply disruptions continue for months. Goldman Sachs has already revised growth expectations lower for Japan and parts of Southeast Asia, questioning whether Asia's resilience so far is sustainable or simply the result of temporary buffer stock depletion. The longer the conflict continues, the greater the risk of demand destruction across Asia. Higher fuel prices could eventually reduce industrial activity, weaken consumer spending, and slow economic growth across the region, deepening the broader global energy crisis. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Now, EU countries and European Parliament lawmakers have reached a deal to ease some of Europe's landmark artificial intelligence rules, including delaying the implementation of key requirements for high-risk AI systems.
Now, the move comes as European officials face growing pressure from businesses, which argue that strict digital rules and red tape, they are hurting their ability to compete with US and Asian rivals. The tentative agreement was reached after 9 hours of negotiations between EU governments and lawmakers. The changes still need formal approval from EU member states and the European Parliament in the coming months. The EU's AI Act it entered into force in August 2024, with different parts of the law scheduled to take effect in stages.
Now, under the new agreement, rules covering high-risk AI systems will now be delayed until December 2nd, 2027. The previous deadline had been set for August 2nd, 2026. Now, the delay applies to AI systems used in areas such as biometrics, critical infrastructure, and law enforcement.
EU officials say the changes are part of a wider push to simplify digital regulations across the bloc. Lawmakers also agreed to remove machinery from the AI Act, arguing that the sector is already covered by existing industry rules.
Now, at the same time, the agreement introduces new restrictions on certain AI-generated content. The EU will ban AI tools that create unauthorized sexually explicit images, including so-called, I'm quoting here, nudifier apps and sexually intimate deepfakes. The ban follows concerns over content generated by AI chatbots, including Elon Musk's XAI chatbot, Grok. The restrictions will take effect from December 2nd. The EU also agreed to require mandatory watermarking of AI-generated content to help users identify synthetic media. Despite the changes, the EU's AI Act is still considered the world's strictest set of AI rules.
Now shifting our focus to the world of sports, Neymar has publicly apologized to his Santos teammate and former Brazilian star, Robinho's son, Robinho Jr., for slapping him during a training session.
The 34-year-old admitted he crossed the line. The Brazilian club opened an investigation after the 18-year-old forward reportedly accused Neymar of delivering a violent slap to the face on Sunday. And according to Brazilian media, the spat occurred because Neymar did not appreciate being dribbled past by his teenage teammate. Speaking to media, Neymar said, and I'm quoting, "If you want an apology in front of the media, here it is. I did overreact, yes, in the way I reacted. It could have been different, but I ended up losing my head. Everyone makes mistakes. It was my mistake, his mistake. I made a slightly bigger mistake. He's a boy I like very much, for whom I have a special affection. It happens in football. You argue with your friend, your brother."
Now, Robinho Jr. also confirmed that Neymar had slapped him but said the incident was over. He further added, and I'm quoting him here, "It was a situation that upset me because Neymar has been my ideal since I was a child. People around us say a lot of things that aren't true, and it's sad to see it blow up to this level. But I'm fine. I like him a lot. We're already talking and it's all sorted."
Now, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced on May 7 that South Korean K-pop group BTS plans to return to Mexico in 2027, a day after the band made a visit to the National Palace in Mexico City.
Well, during a regular morning press conference, Sheinbaum revealed that she personally extended the invitation to the 7-member group during their visit. She showed a video recorded inside the government palace in which she asked them directly, "Do you want to come back to Mexico next year?" To which the band members responded with a unanimous yes. The president described herself as the messenger of a popular demand, adding that the band had discussed it among themselves before agreeing.
Now, she further said, and I'm quoting, "They will come back next year, of course. They have to look at their schedule. They have to see when. It is good news for everyone who loves this group." Now, the announcement came a day after BTS visited the National Palace, where the band appeared on one of its balconies to greet an estimated 50,000 fans gathered outside. The K-pop band is scheduled to perform on May 9th and 10th in Mexico City. All right, with that, we call a wrap to World DNA for today. News and updates will follow on the other side of a very short break. We leave you with some climate stories that are making Headlines across the world.